Hi everyone. Thanks for inviting me. And let's see. Okay, so as Mark said, I'm Director of Sustainability for BAM. I'm an architect, and I tend to have more a design focus than construction, procurement, FM. But actually, today I want to talk to you about operational efficiencies. Because I think sustainability is all about efficiency. You know, actually getting efficiencies from design, making sure that we procure materials efficiently. We optimise construction, but also, as we're seeing from clients, the main focus of our buildings and the industry is actually making sure that our buildings perform as intended, and that's really important. And that's something that, whilst we may not badge it as sustainability all the time, I think it's an efficient way of working. This diagram is something we put together recently, and it's really to show the interrelationships between BIM, FM and sustainability. So whilst we're talking about BIM here, personally I don't believe that information management is very useful unless you've got a story to tell. Unless you're actually creating efficiencies for the building, creating efficiencies for moving from across the life cycle of the building or built environment. Actually, sustainability operation of buildings is key. Otherwise, information management or BIM becomes more a clash detection, coordination, something that is becomes a 3D model that you're designing with. Whereas actually, that's probably a very small part of what I want to talk about today. Sustainability, just as a general background, there's been very little data over the last 5, 10, 20 years even on the benefits of sustainable buildings. Now, in the last 2 years, there's been a huge leap. The World Green Building Council, they launched a report, and it's the business case for sustainability. And it was great because suddenly there were a few metrics that actually said sustainable buildings do perform better. So the highest LEED or BREEAM buildings will be maybe 35% more energy and water efficient than a standard building. And that's great. But actually, when you look at the non-tangible benefits of sustainable buildings, which are usually forgotten, you can see here that daylighting, so a very heavily daylit space contributes to productivity. So suddenly we're talking about health, well-being, productivity, and satisfaction as some of the key metrics that sustainability informs, and that's great. And it's also great that clients and the industry are looking at health and well-being as one of the issues around sustainability and how we can improve that. I've talked about briefly how clients are actually looking to contractors, but also designers, generally the industry, to see how we can ensure or assure that our buildings are going to perform. And it's this performance gap that really we need to try and close. So the performance gap in terms of energy has been widely publicised. The fact that EPCs don't necessarily correlate with how a building is going to use energy over time. But actually it goes a lot deeper than that. Really what we're talking about is ensuring that the buildings perform as intended from a maintenance, operation, a life cycle point of view, to ensure that the building is durable, it's fit for purpose. And energy is actually a very small part of that. So, has everyone heard of government soft landings? There's a lot of nods. And that's been a key driver recently, and previously soft landings. In terms of actually government committing on getting some sort of metric, some sort of information management system that enables the process following the RIBA work stages to follow to follow a system, a model, which will ensure that we're thinking about the end, at the very beginning. So when we're sat around the table designing or talking to the client, we're actually getting the brief from them. We're actually carrying out the pre-occupancy surveys, if you like, that will ensure that the buildings post-occupancy will actually perform. So there's a whole process that we've, as BAM, we've put together to to respond to those requirements. And a lot of it is around coordination, around collaboration, and also information management in the how that information is going to be passed from person to person, because as you procure a project, as you're going along the R&D work stages, there tend to be key gaps, and that's really when you lose that information. So going from design to construction to FM, to operation, and that's really what we want to come out. So the opportunity here is really a broad estimate, if you like, is that actually the benefits that we're going to see, if we want to see benefits using it, using BIM, is in the operation of the building, and that's really what our focus is looking at how we can embed the right data into a model to make sure that it's useful, because there's no point putting everything into a model if the client doesn't really know what they wanted in the first place. Sorry, I forgot to say I'm not a BIM expert, but I know within my role what I want to see it do and what clients are asking for. So if I say something that's not actually correct from a BIM perspective, just feel free to correct me or correct everyone else. So really what we're looking at is the ideology that BIM is useful for the operational phase of the building, and you can factor in the maintenance, the durability, the life cycle of materials, but also systems within a building. So our approach is really looking at all of the life cycle of those stages, starting with design, but actually, probably more importantly, starting with the briefing process. So taking past 1192, and actually, talking to clients about what the requirements are in the first place. Those plain language questions that enable those decisions to be made both from day one, but then how are we going to follow that through? How are we going to get the right people involved to put that the data in place? As I said now. We also, as standard now, we're starting to roll out BIM 360 Field. So a number of our projects and our northeast office in Leeds is probably the front runner in that, with Leeds Arena, with Bradford ATC and a few others, where we've actually used BIM-enabled iPads to actually monitor site activities to verify the state of play on site, therefore cutting down on time taken to write up things in the office, but you can actually quickly understand what elements of the building you have or haven't got, carry out reports to rectify that, and then send those directly to the engineers, architects, etc. So just from a time and coordination point of view, and obviously coordinating models, that's been really efficient. But really what I want to talk to you about is how we've used that beyond the clash detection, beyond the verification, the QA, if you like, to try and make it more useful. So we have done one trial, one pilot, of actually trying to use BIM for FM, and it's been really successful, and I think we're looking at one or two others, where actually we're talking to clients for certain tenders, and actually we realise that their asset is greater than the one building that we're building for them. It's actually maybe a whole estate in some cases. So retrospectively going in and surveying, doing cloud point surveys to some of their estate or all of their estate even, because actually a lot of our clients don't understand the value of that asset, and that's really what it comes down to, is how can we enable information management within big estates, within new buildings, within existing buildings or portfolios. So for UCL Academy, the Camden School project, we built it. We were not the designers for this one, so we built it, and we're also managing it. So we're the FM provider. So that gave us a good incentive to actually go in and retrospectively look at how we can make those efficiencies going forward, how we can carry out the post-occupancy evaluations, and see how it's performing. And it was a great exercise to do. And whilst we didn't have three-dimensional drawings from the architects and the engineers, we went into the building, we carried out a cloud point survey, and then started adding information back in. So number 2 is sort of going back in, putting information in, and where we're heading now is actually linking, I think we're just about there now, linking that information to the BMS so that they talk to each other, and you can actually make more proactive decisions rather than, I don't know how many FM providers there are. Can I have a show of hands? One. Just Mark. But as Mark will know, generally a lot of the waste with FM companies when you tender for a project is that you have to survey everything, and you have to survey everything again because that information is not there. And I suppose our approach going forward, as we're handing over buildings to clients, we're also handing over the virtual model. It contains the right information. So rather than having lorry full loads of O&M manuals, which rarely get used, or you generally don't know where things are, what to do, and when you hand things over to a client, you're handing it over to your client, whereas the person that actually is going to run the building may not come on board till later. So there's always this information gap, which we have to deal with. So going forward, our strategy is that we get our FM teams involved at the design stage of buildings, so that we can avoid this exercise that we're having to do, which is retrospectively to have to go in and start amalgamating all of that information and creating it from scratch. Saying that, it's been a really useful exercise, and obviously linking the BMS to BIM will enable us, or is enabling us even, to make those proactive decisions. So not having to be reactive about the maintenance schedules, replacements, life cycle of things, of stuff, but actually being proactive and understanding ahead of time what needs to be done. And it's just a great position to be in. So, those benefits are obviously that we're making smarter decisions, you're able to be more proactive, as I said. You'll optimize the performance of the building, because if you see something's not working quite right, you can sort of rectify it ahead of time. And it means that generally you're able to involve people at an earlier stage to make those decisions. So the benefits for the client as well are key. They get a better understanding of the building because of that information management piece. And I think most importantly, their assets will perform as expected. And I was talking earlier to one of the guys, saying that clients now, it's very rare, but I think one of the issues being that when you buy a car or you buy something else, you generally know it's going to perform, and if it doesn't, you'll go back to the showroom. You've got a 5-year guarantee. It's all serviced for you. Everything happens for you. Whereas with buildings, so more often than not, we're still used to at PC handing over the keys and then moving on to the next job. Whereas actually, that's practical completion. You're sort of walking away at practical completion. It's not actually complete until it's been operated for a year, maybe 2 or 3 years. So again, going back to the government soft landings approach, that's a mindset that we're trying to get away from. That actually you're not handing over the keys and moving on to the next job, but you're hanging around. You're sort of providing that support to make sure that the building will perform as intended. And obviously that's a key benefit for any client. Obviously, proactive maintenance, understanding where, you know, your fan coil units, your fans, your filters, things like that are. If this was a suspended ceiling, enabling the maintenance contractor to come in and actually pinpoint exactly where he needs to go, you know which roof tile he needs to lift up to access the fan or the filter that needs to be replaced, rather than sort of taking a stab in the dark, going up here and finding that actually he needs to be in the other corner. So it's just little things that make that experience a lot more efficient. And then, I probably touched on it, but lower running costs. Generally, I think where we're heading with the whole government soft landings approach is looking at the government task force, the construction task force that was set up 5 years ago or so, to deliver those savings, 25 to 30% savings on a building. And that's looking at not just the capital cost, but the whole life cycle costs of the building, including the operation and maintenance. So what next? I think it's entirely possible that we will live in smart cities, and there are certain things that we're doing in our infrastructure to enable that already. So I think it's only a matter of time until maybe we won't call it a smart city because it will just happen seamlessly. But being able to use mobile phones to sort of track what's happening around you, such as Airbnb, Uber, which are sharing economy type of approaches, which I'm very keen on promoting. But actually understanding how you can talk to one another through data, and in time buildings will talk to each other as well. So I think the future is probably looking at smart cities. And again, moving forward, we're very keen to promote resource efficiency. I've talked about efficiencies, and moving that one step forward, the circular economy is another sort of key step or key milestone that the industry needs to grasp. And again, can I have a show of hands for anyone who understands what the circular economy is? Okay, 2, 3-ish, 2.5. That's Michelle, 3.5. So Ellen MacArthur started the Ellen MacArthur Foundation about 3 years ago now, and it was really out of curiosity that she understood that having sailed around the world in 72 days, she realised that actually she had to take a finite amount of resource around the world for that period of time. And I suppose this is her speech, but it made her realise that there's a lot of waste. There's a certain amount of things we need to survive. But actually, what we're doing is we're taking material from the earth, natural resources. We're converting it into a product, so we're manufacturing. We consume, and just imagine a Coke bottle, for example, and then we throw it in the bin, and it gets sent to landfill. So that's a very linear process, whereas actually what we need to do is move to a circular process where actually at the very start of that process you're designing something to manufacture it, knowing that it will be reused again. So knowing that actually it's not going straight to landfill because we don't have enough things or stuff to do that with. But actually you're designing something knowing that it will be reused, you're using certain materials, you're manufacturing knowing that actually you've got a certain circularity process in place. And it's been found that there are billions worth of savings to be had if we're all to shift towards that. So that's something that we're really keen to promote. and we see it as a benefit to our business, but also information management and BIM is going to help us to do that. So I haven't put any more slides up except to say that we finished a circular building in the Netherlands. I think we're probably the first contractor in the world to do that. A very successful building for us, and a lot of it was around creating value for the end user in the same way I've been talking about the last 10 minutes. And you know, we sort of came up with a material passport which wasn't digital, and I think this is where we need to go to. So this is sort of some of our thought processes going forward, to enable us to use information management to provide that information when we're handing over that virtual model to a client, to enable the life cycle choices to be understood around all materials, systems, products, etc., so that we can actually make more use of those things, those systems, the components, materials, products, so that we're thinking again from the very beginning how we're going to use those buildings and products. We can be more proactive in the life cycle, and ultimately so we can reuse buildings, because that's what we should be doing, rather than just, you know, after 60 years you think, well, actually I want a building, let's demolish that. And the reason we do that now is because when we're demolishing buildings, or when we're deciding that demolishing is better than rebuilding or reusing, it is because there is no information there. You know, the information doesn't exist. So, you know, material without information is waste, generally. So that's what we want.
I'm stressing really is this thing that there is an incredible amount of waste that goes into the whole kind of tender process in terms of asset verification. A lot of the times when we're tendering, and those in the room that may be more involved in construction and less involved in facilities management may not be aware of this, but tendering because that was the last time that anybody had bothered to do any kind of asset verification. So what had happened is that 3 or 4 years before, the client had paid several £1,000s for that winning contract to go to all their sites they're running, and getting that data, and then feeding it in, paying for it, and then it hadn't been updated for those years. So there's an incredible amount of waste. In terms of, you know, particular retrospective studies, how do you think we can get more and more clients on board with kind of understanding the benefits of that, thinking more longer term in terms of building operation and life cycle?
It's difficult, and generally we're talking to the slightly more enlightened clients that actually do understand that, you know, whilst they might have 2 different departments dealing with capital costs and another one dealing with operational costs, if you put the 2 people together in the same room, because they never talk to each other, if you put them together, you can actually understand that you can make decisions for, you know, the first person dealing with capital costs that will inform, it will make it a lot better for the operational cost of the building. So we're starting to sort of not impose ourselves, but talk to clients about those benefits, and it is quite simple. It's you know, let's not just talk about capital costs, but we can make you savings over the life of your building if you think longer term.
Yeah. Hopefully over time there'll be some kind of traction and getting the message across. We have a question at the back.
Yeah, George Stevenson from Active Plan. Unfortunately, I missed the beginning of your presentation, but in terms of the point that you're making there, are you using the OIR part of BIM, which is the organisational information requirements? And the reason I'm asking that question is because I was talking with somebody yesterday, and they weren't aware of the 1:5:200 ratio. And again, that might be something that the older ones of us in the room will know of, but a lot of other people might not know of. So it's really how the building actually impacts on the organisational value that the client has. And that has a big impact, I would say, on making sure that they are more heavily engaged in both the design and also the asset management side of things, because it can have an impact on their outcome.
You might have missed the bit where I said I'm not a BIM expert, so I can't answer that at all. But you know, we're getting more involved when we're briefing clients to actually help them, and we're actually writing for them their EIRs,
Yes.
so their information employees requirements, and that's to pass 1192.
Yeah.
To make sure that they're asking the right questions. So I don't know if that sort of semi-answers your question.
Well, the EIR really should include the AIR and also the OIR. Yeah, because what that's doing is defining. Sorry, it's too many acronyms. But the key thing about it is the client needs to fully describe what it is they want out at the end.
Yeah.
So that the team can then be delivering that progressively through. But importantly, it also means that the client has got to describe and think about how they're actually going to use the building, both now and how that might evolve as their organisation evolves.
Yeah.
And building some relationship, therefore, between the value that they actually get out of the building and how the building is created and managed is an important aspect. Richard Saxon did a lot of work on that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Okay. I'm conscious of the time. There will be a section at the end of the conference today as well for a bit more of a question and answer session with some of the keynote speakers. So if